Hey folks, it's me, Matt, from Battery Low. Just wanted to pop in here real quick before the episode starts and say that this one kinda went a lot longer than we thought it would, which is fine. Grab a snack, kick back, and relax with us. Or listen to it in chunks. I don't care what you do with your time. But in this episode, we explain what we're doing, but we don't really explain who we are. And since we're only 2 episodes in and you might not know who we are and somehow found this podcast, hi, by the way, let me do that real quick. Myself and my friend Zach are 2 longtime friends who started a blog, batterylow.co, and wanted it to be a place where we can dump our thoughts, where we can exercise our writing skills, and just generally make fun stuff for fun's sake. We mostly focus on gaming, with a splash of movies and TV added in there, and sometimes I will talk about Disney parks, because nobody can stop me, not even myself. And that's mostly what this podcast will be, gaming, movies, TV, and sometimes Disney park stuff. Let me think here. That's it for the preamble, folks. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Battery Low Podcast. My name is Zach.
I'm Matt.
And today, Matt, why don't you fill everyone in on what we're doing today?
I would love to do just that thing that you said. Today, we're wrapping up our sort of Get to Know Us series, where we talk about our favorite things, so you can know what we're looking for in the things that we're talking about. So that when we talk about something, you have a baseline for our sort of criteria. We already did an episode about our favorite video games, so be sure to check that one out if you haven't already. This episode will cover the rest of it. Entertainment that isn't video games, including but not limited to TV shows, movies, and theme parks. And before we get into it, we have to establish something. Zach and I have wildly different opinions on things.
Yeah.
We go into movies and expect very different things out of them. For example, I go to movies to appreciate the craft. I want to be immersed in a world. I want to be emotionally engaged. I don't want to be talked down to. And I want to appreciate the writing, the performances, all of it as a whole, as a story. I want to know what it's saying and decide if it's saying it well. I guess ultimately, I really appreciate it when I can see the passion of the filmmakers on screen, when a clear vision is brought to life in front of me, and that vision can resonate, entertain, dazzle, impact, or transport me to another world. And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Zach, do you want to enlighten the people and then get started with your number 10?
Yes, I do. Listen here, people. Movies need 2 things: explosions and expletives. No, just joking. But on a more serious note, I am going to see movies and shows and really anything less for the craft and more to be entertained. While I can appreciate the craft, and can identify aspects of, filmmaking that feel really important and feel like are my style, if that makes sense. Like, I think I can identify those things, but for the most part, when thinking about the pieces of film and TV that I enjoy the most or just love the most and things that I would categorize as my favorites, it really does come down to entertainment value. What did I find entertaining? Was that an enjoyable use of my time? And so you'll notice that a lot of my picks today are surrounded around that. And that's what I go for.
Let me jump in there. Entertainment value is ultimately, yes, the end goal for me
Matt
as well.
doesn't want to be entertained. Each summer he goes boringest movie of the summer 2022.
No. And one more note before you say your 10, we're going to be cheating a lot. These aren't going to be like individual things.
Yeah.
We really want you to sort of get the breadth and scope of what we like in these things. and just 10 things really doesn't encompass it. So we're kind of going to be going category, kind of genre, and have sort of a prime example of that, but there will be multiple things in our top 10. So it won't just be 10 movies or 10 TV shows.
Yep.
So you'll get kind of a wide variety. And this isn't necessarily like what we think are the best movies. These are the movies that have like impacted us the most, or that we go back to a lot, or that, you know, really encapsulate what we're looking for in movies and TV shows and, well, theme parks, which if you know me, you know where this is going already. But, you know, we'll save that for later.
Yeah. Well, let me get started with my 10, shall I?
You shall.
Side note, we never say shall I, do we? It's always like shall we? But shall I? It doesn't really feel right. Anyway, number 10. Coming in hot. This may feel surprising, but Tangled is my number 10 movie. And here's why. Disney princess films are some of the most fun and enjoyable pieces of film that I think we have. And I think that comes from the creativity of them. I think that comes from the musical nature of most of them. All of them? Are they all musicals? Some of the best soundtracks.
Mostly.
Yeah, mostly. Some of the best soundtracks, I think, come from Disney princess films. However, I also find myself really captivated by how they have evolved. I think there is a history of Disney princess films being pretty stereotypical in ways and pretty problematic in others. And I think as culture evolves, and that's just sort of the story of Disney in general, right? Is like you go back and watch some old Disney stuff and it's like, wow, that didn't really age well. And some stuff really did, but I think Disney princess films, they're almost too big to fail at this point, and so they have to change with our culture and society, you know. And so, but I just think they're fun, you know. When I go see one of those movies, I want a good soundtrack. I want something that is gonna get stuck in my head. I want for the first time in forever. I want a Let It Go. I want How Far I'll Go from Moana, right? I want one of those things. And so Tangled is my favorite one of those. I think it is criminally underrated and underappreciated. I think Tangled walked so Frozen could fly, if that makes sense. Or Frozen could run.
Hard agree.
That's probably the better way to say it. I don't know. Frozen flew compared to Tangled. Probably,
It's true.
But I think Tangled is just a really great movie. So Disney princess films in general are things that I enjoy, and Tangled is at my number 10. But Matt, what about you?
Here we go, folks. First of all, yes, Tangled is better than Frozen, and that's one where we agree on. You'll find like 2 or 3 instances of overlap here, and that's one of them. So starting off my number 10, I'm cheating already. I am going to talk about my guilty pleasure movies before I really get into the meat of it. And these are movies that I know they're not, you know, Oscar winning. They're not prestige. Sure. I don't go to the movies primarily for like, you know, art house, indie, you know, sort of deep contemplative stuff. And this is a prime example of it. I'm starting out with the silly ones that I enjoy, even though I know they're not great. Detective Pikachu, Bumblebee, and The Greatest Showman are the prime examples that I've picked of movies that, you know, are very flawed, are very goofy, are very silly, but they're so much fun. They give me exactly what I want and more. And in the case of The Greatest Showman, they delivered one of the most boppin' soundtracks in film history. Okay? Okay, honey? Look up that soundtrack if you haven't, and just listen to it, and just be prepared. You cannot listen. I challenge you, listener, right now. You. Yeah, you're looking around. I'm talking to you. Listen to the Greatest Showman soundtrack right now, and tell me you cannot wiggle your toes at least to that soundtrack. That's a toe-wiggling soundtrack, dang it.
Toe-wiggling, baby.
And Bumblebee, I'm just a big, you know, Transformers fan from my childhood. I grew up with the cartoons, and it really realized that on screen in a way that I think the Michael Bay films kind of failed to realize in a sort of fun, family-friendly adventure film kind of way. And Detective Pikachu, come on. I'm a lifelong Pokemon fan, and I got to see Pikachu fight Mewtwo in live action. That's all I need to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are my movies that I watch a lot, even though I know they're not great. And so that's starting off my list with the fun stuff,
Yeah.
the guilty pleasure, goof 'em up times.
Yeah.
And that's my number 10.
I was just thinking that's like your Zach category in it, where it's like, because that's something that you'll probably notice throughout my list is I will say something and I'll be like, this is the best of this category. And you'll be like, that's not true. And that's basically what you just presented was your Zach category. So I appreciate that. But coming in at number 9 for me is a movie called The Holiday, which is it's kind of a twofer. It's kind of a 2-for-1 here because I am just unashamedly a huge fan of rom-coms. Romantic comedies are just, they're the best feel good. But I also like a good Christmas film. So I feel like The Holiday kind of captured both of those, and The Holiday is my favorite Christmas movie. I know it's not like a super traditional one. But always enjoy watching it during the holidays. But the thing about rom-coms is that they are so cheesy, but also so endearing. And they're easy watching, right? Like, I feel like I can always go watch a rom-com, something like Hitch, something like Failure to Launch, and I don't feel like I'm going to go in and be like, okay, this is going to require all of my attention the whole time. It's something that I can go in and it's like, yeah, I'm going to give it my attention, and it's going to be silly and fun, and, it'll just be whatever it really wants to be. I would not say rom-coms are like peak cinema in any fashion, so I am definitely not making that argument. There are some rom-coms that I would say are some of my favorite movies, but are easily some of the worst crafted movies maybe ever, and so I think because of that, that's why they're so high on my list. But man, are they fun to watch. They are just such an enjoyable time. So rom-coms and The Holiday with Jack Black and Cameron Diaz, it's just great. That is my number 9.
There you go, folks. We're moving on to my number 9, which is pivoting immediately from movies. My hierarchy of entertainment goes thusly. TV shows, movies, and video games. We already talked about video games, so TV shows are going to end up a little lower on the list. I don't watch a ton, but here I'm going to talk about animated TV shows at number 9. I love me some animated TV shows. Some examples that really align with my tastes are Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Gravity Falls, Adventure Time, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Transformers Prime, and My Hero Academia. Yeah, I dip my toe into anime every now and then. Not a ton though. Dip the toe, dip back out every. I just kind of I test the waters every now and then with anime.
Yeah.
But Star Wars: The Clone Wars is definitely one of my favorite TV shows of all time. I grew up with that show, so boom, inbuilt nostalgia. It's Star Wars. You'll be hearing about that again later. And it's some of the best Star Wars, actually. I think Star Wars: The Clone Wars is better than probably half of the movies.
Yeah.
And if you've seen it, I would hope that you're nodding along with me because, yeah, especially season 7. Come on, the Ahsoka episodes. Yeah, you're nodding. Yeah, I see you nodding. Thank you. And Gravity Falls, maybe one of the best cartoon, Disney shows of all time. It's so funny. It's so weird. And the sort of like long-running narrative and yet sort of episodic nature of it, like it's got really fun standalone episodes, but there's always a story going on in the background, and the tone of it is so cool. The jokes are so funny, like for all ages, and it just was like so unique. And I think it came in, it did what it had to do, and it got out before it like got tired. And that's great. Adventure Time, again, grew up with the show. Probably like really informed my sense of humor, if I'm going to be honest. Um,
Yeah.
just because I had never heard something like that. Um, Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's fantastic. A million words have been said about it, and deservedly so. Transformers Prime is a really good piece of Transformers media, and that's kind of rare nowadays. Go watch it. It's a really fun cartoon for all ages. That I think you'll be surprised the quality of storytelling. And My Hero Academia, if you know, you know. If you like anime, and even if you don't, I think it's a good, little starting point. And yeah, animated TV. That's my number 9.
Bingo. My number 8, coming a little sooner than maybe even Matt thought, is Star Wars.
Whoa!
Specifically, yes, Episode 8, The Last Jedi.
Whoa!
Yes, The Last Jedi is the best Star Wars movie.
We're going there, folks!
Yeah.
Episode 2 of the podcast. We're making controversial headlines.
Yeah. I'm making waves, all right? So surf along. But here's the thing. There are some of my opinions that are subjective where, you could disagree and it's like, that's fine. The Last Jedi being the best Star Wars movie is an objective truth. And anyone who does not think that is sorely mistaken.
Wow, you're really fishing for hate mail, right off the bat.
You know what? This is... I know my fortress is strong, all right? So, yeah.
I love that.
Bring on the attacks. I know what I'm about.
I love that.
And here's why. I think... this is really going to ruffle feathers. As much as I love Star Wars, specifically the movies, I haven't gotten a lot into, the animated shows. I have been watching the live-action shows, starting with The Mandalorian and stuff like that, and that's been really fun. But of the movies specifically... the original trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6, they're boring. All of them, boring. That's too big of a statement. I generally think that some of them, and naturally they're just slower movies, right? And that was...
Sure. Different time.
Yeah. Film for the time. But I think now watching them, it's like, oh man, these really do just kind of trudge along at times, don't they? Even if there is a rich story, even if there is character development happening, I think there are times where it's like, man, this is really, we're moving at a snail's pace. And then not to even mention that 4 and 6 are basically the same movie. But the original trilogy, I can appreciate it for how groundbreaking it was, for their use of practical effects and just how amazing those movies still look. I think they hold up pretty well, especially if you ignore the added CG that they added in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Kick that out, just the original stuff. I think it's amazing. But here's the thing. The story of 4, 5, and 6, I don't think is that compelling. The story of episodes 1, 2, and 3, I think is incredibly interesting and incredibly well thought out. The execution of 1, 2, and 3, awful, terrible, dung even, okay? It's just so hard to sit through. Yes. So, but see, here's the thing. I feel like a true Star Wars fan at times when I'm able to say this of oh yeah, Star Wars is one of my favorite series, but I don't like most of them, right? That's a true Star Wars fan.
Absolutely.
And 1, 2, and 3, just the execution was off. It's hard to imagine the amazing actors they have for the prequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy is what I said. Prequel trilogy is that word.
It's a mouthful.
You know what? It's a tongue twister for me. The acting talent that they have in those movies, they should not be that bad. It almost feels difficult that they were as bad as they were. So that leads us to episodes 7, 8, and 9, where... Well, so... I mean, I haven't talked about 7, 8, and 9 yet. So, 1 through 3, bad.
Go ahead.
4 through 6, slow. Episode 7, I actually thought was entertaining. Sure, maybe also a direct clone of episode 4 in that way. They've used that story multiple times of they've got a big ship. Let's take our Star Blasters and go get them.
Oh my gosh. Oh my golly.
That's the story. Enter episode 8, And I feel like Star Wars finally hit a rhythm of like, wow, what an amazing story, what an amazing journey, and also what amazing execution. Also,
Mm-hmm.
thank goodness we finally left a sand planet, right? Like, just get
Yeah.
me out of there, get me some green, and preferably somewhere that's not raining. And I know that it's not all on sand planets before I get the hate mail. Okay, it's fine. But there's a lot of sand in Star Wars. When it's like they have the whole universe, give me some more scenery than that. But
It's true.
episode 8 feels like that perfect intersection for me of like, wow, what an amazing story. Really well executed, great cinematography. Just like, I just like the whole thing was really good and captivating and creative for a Star Wars movie, which I feel like is not something that I can always say. And so, because of that, The Last Jedi is my favorite movie. Despite everything I just said, I do love the Star Wars films. I love that universe especially. And so now that they're building into shows like The Mandalorian and Obi-Wan and stuff like that, I just think it's really fun and really enjoyable. And this conversation we'll have to save for another day. But I'm definitely in the camp of like, the Skywalker saga is fine. Let's leave that and let's enter literally an entire new time period and start fresh.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think they should go next. But Star Wars, love it, live by it. Also, hate most of them. But Matt, what is your number 8?
Wow. What a series of words you just said. I have so many thoughts, but I'll get back to that.
I may have to take the explanation I just gave. It was pure art. I may have to send it to the Louvre. I mean, they're gonna want to hear that. Like that was it
Yeah.
was peak. But
That's going in the Library of Congress, folks. They are putting it in there right now.
yeah,
They're also going to put this in there. My number 8, drama television.
oh
I don't watch a ton, but I do
yeah,
dip in. And the few that I have here, I really love and have really impacted me. Um, we can quibble over the categories. We needed a top 10 kind of format, and these don't really fit in, but top 10 get the clicks, baby. Stranger Things, Sherlock, Severance, and The Mandalorian.
oh
Uh-oh, Star Wars is there again. You're gonna have
yeah,
to deal with it. Stranger Things. Um, how it's able to encapsulate an era and sort of pay homage to it, but have its own thing to say, using the iconography of the time, brilliantly done. A really well written show, a really interesting, intriguing mystery with season 1. Season 2, kind of whatever. Season 3 got me by the end, and season 4, oh my gosh. Season 4, like watching it on the couch with my family and then talking to my friends about it, it was like the end game of TV shows, where it's just like, oh my gosh, I
yeah.
can't believe this is happening. Like all of us screaming on the couch, throwing up our snacks, like not throwing up, but like tossing them up. It wasn't that crazy. Let's calm down. But it, truly is like a really good example of how to build a world and how to get people invested in characters and how to subvert expectations.
Yeah.
With characters like Steve, who start out as like the typical ladies bully, and they turn that trope on its head and make him like one of the most lovable moms in television. And so that's great. I love Stranger Things. Super super excited for season 5. Can't wait to see how they end it all. Sherlock, again, a million things have been said about Sherlock. Great mystery, great acting, really interesting directing choices at times, and it just always kept me on my toes. I was really excited every time one would come around.
Yeah.
Got really I didn't get like super invested like some people did, where like the
Sure.
online forums and like the theory crafting and all that, but I was always like enthralled, glued to the screen. For those really long episodes, I never looked away. I never felt the length. They could have been 10 hours long each. Severance is a new one, but it has already made
Yeah.
my list. Severance is a show that came out this year on Apple TV Plus, I believe,
Hmm.
and it's like mind blowing. Um,
Yeah.
the concept is so clever of like you can look it up later, but like severing your mind so that you don't remember your memories when you're in work and you don't remember your, work memories when you're outside of work. You're kind of two different people. Um, and the people that work for that company, they don't really know what they're doing, and the company's kind of shady, and there's like a mystery, but there's also like dark comedy, but there's also like thriller elements. It really defies genre, and that's kind of another thing that I like, is something that uses genre as a tool to kind of do
Hmm.
something new. Um,
Yeah.
and this show definitely does that. Um, and then, so check it out for sure. Definitely check out Severance. It's great. Um, the Mandalorian, Star Wars, the first Star Wars TV show,
Mm.
um, and such a departure for Star Wars. This kind
Yeah.
of Western lone wolf um, escort mission of a show. It was just so weird and different and kind of refreshing, um, and well done and good to look at. And Ludwig Göransson's score, who is the guy that did the score for Black Panther, among other things,
Oh.
did such a good job with the score of like instantly making. You have a lot to live up to when you're going to make music in the Star
Right.
Wars universe,
Yeah.
and he knocked it out of the park like right away. Um, and so yeah, can't wait to see what's next for Mando. And so that's kind of my number eight. Some sort of drama, action TV
Yeah.
shows for ya.
Brilliant. Um,
Brilliant.
Brilliant. There's more overlap to our lists than I thought, but we'll get to that. Number 7 for me. This is sort of a standalone, and I'll explain why it's included in the list. But The Dark Knight.
Mm.
The reason The Dark Knight is included in my list is because whenever I'm asked the question, Zach, what are some of either your favorite movies or some of the best movies you've ever seen? The Dark Knight always comes to my mind for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it encapsulates both categories. One of my favorite movies, a movie I've seen maybe not hundreds. I was about to say hundreds of times. I've seen it dozens of times, and enjoy it every time. And every time it feels just as captivating and engaging, and eerie and intense. And I think like pretty well received critically, even right.
Yeah.
Where I think we have a public consensus. We don't agree on a lot as society, but we agree on The Dark Knight being a great movie, right? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
has to do with it was kind of groundbreaking. God, I can't talk tonight. Groundbreaking, in in the sense that it was kind of the first like good superhero movie, and I think you can make the argument that like sure, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man's and like there are other superhero movies, but before it that were good, but I think it's the first entrance into like okay, let's make a movie about a superhero that's like actually kind of intense, and
Mm-hmm.
carries some weight and has some meaning and creates conflict and isn't just like Batman and he's flying and he's grappling and kicking. It was like no, this is Batman and it's a struggle and there are things going on and the universe is evolving. And Heath Ledger as the Joker is just an amazing performance. But I think everyone in that movie just really knocked it out of the park when it came to their performances and the ways that they just interact with each other in the world. Um, Gosh, it's just such a great movie, and I think that was the catalyst for really propelling this trend of superhero movies being taken seriously. So much so that I don't think we would have Joaquin Phoenix's Joker without The Dark Knight, which is
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, which is I mean, again, a conversation for another day maybe, but um, I just think that was really what opened up the door for even something like the MCU, which I'll talk about later, but opening this door for superhero movies to be, again, taken seriously and something that is more than just a man in a cape, kicking up some bad guys, but introduces a struggle and introduces relational dynamics and pain and regret, but also triumph and excitement. And so I think The Dark Knight is just probably one of the best movies I'll see ever for what it was in an isolated incident. Just that movie by itself is just great. But also just what it did, I think, for the superhero genre in general. I think it was just really powerful. So 7, The Dark Knight, that's mine.
Nice, very nice. My number 7. Still, this is my last TV one. Comedy TV. I like to have a good time when I watch TV. And these shows I feel like are my favorite and are the best. Parks and Rec, all time. Probably the show that I've seen the most. Outside of, I guess, SpongeBob growing up. Also great, by the way. Arrested Development, Bob's Burgers, and Our Flag Means Death, which is also new. But Parks and Rec kind of just encapsulates my energy, where it's it's like silly and it's goofy, but there's heart and there's kind of a sweetness to it, which is nice. And there's a wholesomeness there. There's an optimism there that really shines through, and that's kind of the energy that I try and bring. And I just really like that about the show. It's like, what if The Office was optimistic and not about cringe humor,
right.
But more about goofier stuff.
Yeah.
And it has a real heart. That because it's a comedy, when it breaks out into moments of emotional resonance, it hits because it sticks out so hard. And I just really like it like that. It's a really easy watch. It's really cozy. I love all the characters. I love the sort of guerrilla style that they made it, where there's not a lot of makeup. There's not really lighting. They just kind of have camera people shooting these people being funny in a local government building, and I just think that's really fun. And Arrested Development, I've discovered recently, but this show made me laugh the most, probably. Maybe aside from Parks and Rec, but it's close. It's so funny. It's so weird. The narrator is hilarious. All of the characters are horrible people. It's pretty opposite of Parks and Rec, but it's just funny watching these people just destroy their lives, I guess.
Yeah.
And in glorious fashion. Definitely check out Arrested Development. It kind of goes down when they do the remake or the new seasons on Netflix. Seasons 1 through 3, pure TV gold. Also, one of the earlier projects of the Russo brothers, who we'll get back to later.
Yeah.
And then Bob's Burgers, Zach showed me, and it's so funny. The animated show that has made me laugh the most, and again has sort of, it didn't start like this, but has sort of evolved into being a little sweeter, a little nicer, and less mean-spirited, which I like. And then Our Flag Means Death is a new show. I'm going to say this. It's a Taika Waititi pirate show. Yes. You know all you need to know from that. It's amazing. Go watch it. That's my number 7. Zach!
Yes. My number 6 is Pixar movies. And here is perhaps a controversial opinion if you ask Matt, but
oh boy.
Cars is the best Pixar movie, hands down, by a long shot. No, I mean, by a long shot, in my opinion. Matt and I were actually talking about Pixar movies recently, and I said this opinion, and he was as mortified as he is now. And I was so shook by that I had to go back and watch it. So I did. I watched Cars again, and the whole time I was like, this is just as good as I remember, if not better. It is just such an amazing movie. And here's why. Pixar, and I guess the reason I like Pixar movies in general is because they are the pinnacle of creativity in my mind. They set the standard in that way. I feel like every movie that comes out is reinventing the wheel in some way. Talking about A Bug's Life, Toy Story, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up, Cars. All these movies where it's like no one had really done something like that before. Like I would have just loved to have sat in like their brainstorming sessions and someone's like, what if we made a movie about just like a bunch of bugs and just, their lives and stuff. And then like several years later being like, what if we made a movie about like this star athlete, but instead of like humans, it was cars. And it's like a humbling story. Like I feel like it's those moments where it's like, wow, this is actually really creative in the ways that they are like having us interact with the worlds they create. I just think is really fascinating. Cars to me though, and I think you could say this for probably the majority of Pixar movies, especially something like Finding Nemo, but I think the scores and the music of Cars and the ambiance and the environment it creates and making it feel like, wow, I can picture where Cars is taking place, but also making it so Cars. Like even the mountains kind of being car shaped, you know what I mean? I just think
Yeah.
I just think is really cool, and I think that as weird as it sounds, kind of gives me an immersion into the Cars universe that I think is really powerful. And so Cars is my favorite. I also think, going back to why I choose films, the entertainment value of Cars is just through the roof. All the voice acting in that is perfect. And mainly what I mean by that, maybe a better way of describing that is I think the casting is perfect, because I think the voice acting in Pixar movies is typically, best in class. But the people they had voicing the specific characters, I don't think they could have chosen better or different people. I think it is just like the perfect mix and the perfect vibe. And so Cars to me is just such an amazing film, just even by itself. But on a more meta level, Pixar movies in general, I just really value the creativity and the sort of instant nostalgia that they typically bring. Like, I don't know if there's another category of movies where I see one once and then the next time I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, Cars. Oh, I love that movie, and it's just instantly one of my favorites. And so I think that's true for a lot of the Pixar movies. And what's hard about Pixar for me is the majority of them are 10s, right? Like, it's not me saying like, oh, Cars is the best. I guess I did say that Cars is head and shoulders above the rest. I still believe that, but we're all talking 10s. This is fine margins we're talking about. I think Pixar movies in general just set an amazing standard for, what movies should be and can be, and kind of creating this dynamic where I saw Cars, as a kid and was like, this is awesome. And then watched Cars again as an adult and was like, this is awesome. And being able to have that sort of timeless effect, I think is really special. So Pixar movies, my number 6, Cars is the best, but they're all 10s. Matt, what do you got?
I have one question because I'm really perplexed by that opinion.
Yeah.
I am trying to figure it out, and I've thought about it. Do you like sports movies? Because you did mention that it's about an athlete, and there is like the element of like the athlete down on his luck, kind of washed up, but he's he gets on the grind and he like rises back up to face the rival, and there's a moment of triumph. Is there something there where like because you used to be like big into athletics and yourself, and you are such a big sports fan. Is there something there where do you like sports movies? Is that a component of it maybe?
Here's what makes Cars head and shoulders above the rest is if every Pixar movie had a Rascal Flatts song, they would all be, that would really send them. That's really what
okay.
So yes, actually I have a couple sports movies on my honorable mentions. And that may be part of it. But I if someone were to ask like, hey, what kind of movie is Cars? I wouldn't say Cars is a sports movie.
Right.
I just think, like, again, watching it recently, Owen Wilson, Larry the Cable Guy, like all of the voice actors just really,
Yeah.
it just feels natural and sounds natural, and nothing really feels forced in that movie. And I think I just do enjoy the story of this arrogant, young all-star athlete, or all-star race car, if you will, kind of having a humbling experience. And I don't I don't think we see that a lot in Pixar
No, we
movies
don't see a lot of
specifically.
movies about cars. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, if Cars had Vin Diesel in it, can you imagine? That would just be the crossover of a century. But
You need to see Fast and Furious.
that's probably true. Well, yeah, that's what I meant. But oh, I lost my train of thought in that talking about Vin Diesel. Darn you, Vin. Oh well, Cars.
It's okay.
It's good. Good movie.
Cars. Okay. I
Yeah.
will continue to be perplexed by that.
Please,
But in the
please do.
meantime, listen, I'll fight for your right to think that crazy thing, but it's crazy to me. Um, my number six, I'm going to talk about smaller slash indie-ish movies that have really resonated with me. And I just got three. I don't see a ton of like smaller-ish indie-ish movies. Because like I said, if I'm going to go see a movie, I'm gonna go see one of my favorites or a big experience, a big theatrical
Yeah.
experience usually, or I'm gonna be gaming, um, and so but these movies I've seen and I love them. Jojo Rabbit, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, and Isle of Dogs. Two of those are by Wes Anderson, and one of them is very Wes Anderson-like. So you could say I'm a fan of Wes Anderson. Um,
Oh yeah.
and all of them have a very kind of they have a very similar tone in that they deal with some underlying stuff that's really heavy that
Yeah.
is more apparent in Jojo Rabbit. But there are really complex things going on under the
Mm-hmm.
surface, but there's also like a sweetness and a comedy to it. Um,
Yeah.
and specifically with Jojo Rabbit, I love that it's a really new perspective on something that we've heard a lot about, right? It's a World War II movie through the eyes of a child growing up in the Hitler Youth who is completely indoctrinated in this horrible ideology, and it's his journey of meeting a Jewish girl who has been hidden in his attic by his mother, and kind of opening up his mind and showing him like the truth of what's really going on, and that sort of growth, that journey, but also coupling that with it's pretty silly because it's making fun of the fascist ideologies. It's
Mm.
not making light of it. It's turning it into satire. It's not giving it the respect it deserves. It's poking holes in it, and it's doing so by having Taika Waititi be an imaginary Hitler, like the sort of idolized version that is trying to be engendered by these officers into these youths,
Yeah.
and seeing his progression, seeing Jojo, the main character, his progression throughout the movie. It was just a really memorable experience. It's a really sweet movie. It's it really hits you emotionally, but it
Yeah.
also makes you laugh, and it also kind of shocks you. And again, I like movies that defy genre.
Mm.
And Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs are two stop motion Wes Anderson films. Two things that I love. And the thing I really love about Wes Anderson is he revels in the art of telling a story. And he doesn't shy away from things that will let you know that you're being told a story. And there's something that's sort of
Mm.
comforting about that. There's something sort of, I'm lying down in bed and somebody's reading you a story. Because he always loves to leave fingerprints on the fur of the animals, and he wants you to see sort of how it's made, sort of what's going on, because he wants you to know that there are people behind these stories. There is a real art and a craft going on behind this story, and he wants you to take a peek at that. And I think that's really beautiful. And his movies are also really weird, and the tone is really strange, and the comedy is unusual. And I really like that. I really appreciate that he's doing something weird and different, and
Yeah.
that. But then he will sneak in these moments of like really gut punchingly, like heartfelt moments, and they hit hard. Again, like I've said before,
Yeah.
it when you're in something that tonality tone wise isn't very heavy, isn't very emotional. When there are those moments, they hit that much harder. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like there's specifically a moment in Isle of Dogs. It's like this weird movie about these talking dogs that are like fighting to get off of a trash island, where like there's a translator built that this dog and this human can like understand each other, and the kid is injured and the dog just can keep saying, "I can hear you, I can hear you," and it ruins me, and it comes out
Yeah.
of nowhere, and I'm ruined. And I'm also, here's the thing, I'm a movie crier, and I
Mm.
don't think Zach is very much, but I will get
Yep.
really sucked in emotionally to a movie, and if it can bring out the tears, it's doing its job, and I really appreciate that. And so those are the sort of smaller indie-ish movies that have really impacted me and that are really important to me, and that is
Yeah.
my number 6. Zachary.
Yeah. Before I get to my number 5, I remembered what I was going to say about Cars that Vin Diesel distracted me from. Um,
Oh my gosh.
I The story of Cars is a really interesting one because I think in most Disney and Pixar films and shows, we are immediately loving the main character. That doesn't happen with
Mm,
Cars. Lightning
true.
McQueen is an arrogant kid, right? He's an
Right.
arrogant athlete, and then he ends up kind of being humbled. He doesn't start humble and has a triumph after, in the midst of that. That is his triumph, is becoming humble. And so I just think that's an interesting take on kind of incorporating that
Hmm.
into a Pixar film. So, but my number
Yeah.
5, enough about Cars. Cars is garbage. My number 5 is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which
Oh.
also kind of gets me into like the comedy TV genre. So some honorable mentions here. New Girl, love it. Parks and Rec, love it. The Office, don't love it, and here's why. Cringy humor is really not my thing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
watch The Office, and I think like this is entertaining to watch. Like as a bystander, I watch The Office, and I'm like, I feel uncomfortable, and that's why I don't want to watch it. New Girl, Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine are all so silly and all have such like a charming and energetic vibe to them that they're just so much fun to have around. Brooklyn
Mm-hmm.
Nine-Nine though is head and shoulders above the rest. That's the second time I've used that phrase. It is just so fun and so funny, and Andy Samberg is such a gift. I think that in everything I've ever seen of him or ever seen him like either be acting in or interviewed in, I just really enjoy him as a person. But I think the best thing about Brooklyn Nine-Nine is the whole cast is everything I really want in a show. You have Andy Samberg, who's kind of the goofy one. You have Terry Crews, who is like the responsible one. You have Andre Brower, I think is his last name. Captain Holt. He is just such a interesting guy. And I really like where they got these actors from. Captain Holt, Andre Brower, I think, hopefully I'm saying his last name right, but he is like trained to be a dramatic actor. And in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he's like a pretty like stone cold guy. Like he's not silly and goofy like Andy Samberg is, but the way that they bounce off one another is just so incredible and amazing. And so I think the layers to all of those characters just feels like a perfect sandwich. It has all the ingredients I want, and every bite I take is just better than the next, right? Or better than the one I just took. You know what I'm trying to say. But I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine overall is just really enjoyable. It's one of the shows that I have watched dozens of times as well. No exaggeration on that. I feel like I've watched the entire series multiple times. It does go through some shifts where there was, a change in writing, and obviously, like with our current climate, writing a police show just has its difficulties and things that they want to talk about and want to touch on. And I think they typically do that really well. It never really feels forced. It doesn't really feel like too much. I think there's one episode that comes to mind where it's like, okay, that feels like they changed this for that. But I appreciate them incorporating that into the show and doing it in such a way that makes it easy to watch and digest and easy to understand from a lot of social issues, not just one about how we interact with police. So overall, I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine is just such a wonderful show. And I think that is especially highlighted by the cast and their relationships with one another, and how the writers just develop them as characters. So Brooklyn Nine-Nine and comedy TV is my number 5.
Boosh. I'm going to get to my number 5, but folks, look at the time. It's going to be a little bit of a long one. We're going a little long, but this is such an important episode. This is our taste, baby. Yeah. This is also not typical. We're going to try and keep it usually under an hour, but this is like our big get to know us. Really sit down, have a chat, and you know, get to know what we like, what we're bringing to the table. So my number 5, but I am going to speed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Disney animation is my number 5. And I'm including the princess movies and the non-princess movies. From the current era, I'd say Moana, Encanto, Tangled, and Frozen are my favorites. Encanto especially, and Moana especially, have been like, I've been watching those recently again, and they're so good.
Yeah.
Going a little farther back, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, classics. Come on. Then going back even further, Peter Pan and Fantasia are some of my favorites. I'm not going to say much about these, because you all know these movies. At least I hope you do. But just know that I have a really special place in my heart for these movies. I love Disney. These aren't my favorite things that Disney does, and we'll get to that. But these, are really special to me. And my favorite Disney animated film of all time, which is a little bit cheating, but it's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Stop motion animation is still animation, but again, stop motion. I love stop motion. I love the craft behind it, the artistry, the painstaking process to bring us something that looks so cool and unique. I really appreciate. And The Nightmare Before Christmas, it almost seems like a Pixar movie with the premise, with how creative it is, and with how weird it is. And I love the music. I love the way it looks. I love the story, the kind of journey that he goes on of like just being tired of Halloween and finding Christmas and thinking that's the answer to his woes, but really he needed, someone to understand him. He needed a connection, and I think that's really cool and sweet. And the fact that it's delivered in this weird, grim, like Halloween, gross-looking movie, like I really like. It's weird, and I appreciate that. And the soundtrack also slaps. And so that's my number 5. Disney animations. Really significant, really important.
Brilliant. My number 4, I had to include it because it is just one of my favorite things, but I really don't have that much to say about it. But Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think a common thing I hear when you ask someone about shows is they're like, okay, you just got to power through the first, how many episodes or how many seasons, and then it really starts to get good.
Right.
I think Avatar: The Last Airbender, from the second it starts to the moment it finishes, does not miss. It just is.
Right.
I mean, the pacing is brilliant. The story is brilliant. The character development is brilliant. The only thing is that it's too short, but I think that is what makes it so good, is that they had a vision, they had this idea, and they executed. That's what they wanted it to be. And it was amazing start to finish. And I think typically like anime-esque shows like that, no, it's not an anime because it wasn't Japanese, but they typically have filler episodes or episodes that you can kind of skip and not really miss the story of. But even the filler episodes of Avatar, it's like, wow, those were really powerful and really meaningful. And I felt like were helpful with character development and exposition. And so it's still one that I go back to. It's unfortunately showing its age, just with, shows being blurry now that were from the early 2000s. And not being in like a widescreen format, stuff like that, where it's like you watch it and you're like, this is, not aging as well as I wish it would have. But it's still, it's worth it. The story, just the execution, overall,
Yeah.
I just think it's a great show. And that's my number 4.
I have to agree. I love that show. My number 4, Pixar movies. Zach already touched on these with his, I'll say, interesting discussion about Cars. And I was always, and you could see because it's higher up on this list, I was always more of a Pixar guy than I was a Disney animated guy. I especially, okay, I'll go through some of my favorites right here, and I won't talk about them a ton. Inside Out, Up, WALL-E, Incredibles, Toy Story, Ratatouille, A Bug's Life, Onward, Coco. I love Coco. Pixar just knocks it out of the park almost every time. There are a few. Yeah. We don't talk about The Good Dinosaur, right? We don't talk about Cars 2, right? But the ability to suck tears out of my eyes like no other studio. These guys, they're crazy. The ability to make me immediately be invested in a character's journey, to present some of the most beautiful animated movies of all time, to produce some of the best sounding animated movies of all time. The sound is from the score to the sound design. They're just top notch. The stories are so creative, and the thing I love about Pixar movies as well, and some of the recent Disney animated stuff, is that they're telling new original stories. They're not making remakes. They don't make a ton of sequels, and they're not like adapting things usually. Like Inside Out, Up, WALL-E, all these Incredibles, like they are so original, and in the case of Incredibles, they take like an established genre and flip it on its head. One of my favorite things. You're noticing a pattern here. And they just have such important things to say, I think, especially to kids, but to everybody, and such foundational things to say, such important life lessons, especially Inside Out. The message of the importance of sadness, I think, really hits home and is important and is something that everybody can benefit from hearing and learning.
Yeah.
And I just think I've had some of the most like memorable and I've been really informed by these movies, impacted, I should say, by these movies. And yeah, there's an instant nostalgia factor. A lot of things that they make, most things that they make are instant, like they're in my head and they are locked away in a sweet, sweet place. And I go, "Aw, yeah," every time I think about them. Yeah. So that's number 4, Pixar movies. Take it away, Zach.
Yes. We're in the top 3, baby. My 3.
The big 3, they call it.
The big 3, which is going to be a surprise to nobody. Well, actually, the choice of movie may be a surprise, but overall it's not a surprise. Captain America, The First Avenger is the best MCU movie. And easily my favorite. But I love the MCU as a whole. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think, is the greatest experiment in film. Never before have we seen something with this longevity, something with this amount of care and planning and intentionality, where they had a story spanning 24 movies, right? And that was the Infinity Saga. Yeah, and now we're in the new saga, the multiverse saga, and they're incorporating shows. And so it's like we're getting more MCU content than ever. And with that, comes complications, I'll say.
Sure.
I think especially at this point, things like MCU fatigue, and maybe just disinterest in, some of the new heroes, whatever it is. I think, when you do something this big and this grand, it does kind of create a lot of room for error. But I think more often than not, the MCU hits exactly where it wants to, and exactly where I want it to. And that's why I call it the greatest experiment in film. I honestly think that they are doing something that no one else has ever done, no other studio has done, no other organization or anything has ever done. And so far, it's been going really well. And so I hope they continue to build on that. I hope they continue to kind of create just amazing movies and now shows that get me invested in that universe and understanding those heroes. And so that's why I love the MCU. Captain America, the First Avenger. So my history with the MCU is that I did not start from the beginning in terms of like release order. So I was not seeing these in theaters as they were coming out. As Avengers Endgame was coming out, like maybe a month before, I thought, you know what? I'm going to watch all of the MCU movies. I'm going to get into it now. Why not? There's a lot of hype about it. The hype is just building. Like, let's get into it. So I watched all of the movies at that point, and then saw Endgame and then saw Spider-Man and was invested. However, I chose to enter the MCU not in release order of films, but chronological order. So what that means is that my first movie was not Iron Man 1. It was Captain America, the First Avenger, because chronologically that's what came first. And Captain America, the First Avenger, immediately sold me on the MCU. That was not a movie where I was like, that was fine, but maybe I'll stick it out just to see what the hype is. It's like immediately when I saw that movie, I knew this is a Zach-ass thing, right? Like this is my type of entertainment, just from the beginning. And so really loved that again, it wasn't something like, okay, let me give this some time and maybe I'll grow to love it. It was like from the very first moment I loved it. And so I think with that, Captain America is one of my favorite characters in Marvel, and has been. But I think Captain America, the First Avenger, is also just a really interesting story about this kid who was beat up and small and could never live up to his dreams, and then overnight literally became what he wanted. And instead of like using that for spite, used that for good and had this morality about him, and felt sort of indebted to people to protect them and to sort of embrace the freedom that he thought we should all have. And so I just think it's a really captivating story. I think Captain's origin is just really interesting. There's a lot of trauma in that, a lot of change in that, and that just kind of builds throughout the MCU. And so, yeah, I just think he's a really interesting character, and Captain America just really sent me on this love for the MCU that I have right now. So that's my number 3.
Nice. Well, this is a bit embarrassing. My number 3 is the MCU.
No, it's not. Stop.
It is. It literally is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you said it. It's the greatest experiment in film. It's no franchise has attempted this level of connectedness across this many characters, with this many personalities, with this many directors, with this many, clashing of stories and the breadth and the scope of it. But they all somehow, are tonally consistent and seem like they're a part of the same universe. What an accomplishment. I guess some of my favorites, they change every day. I don't have like a single favorite. That's kind of not how my brain works. I can't just be like, this one is my favorite. Right. I kind of like work better in like the tier list where like these are in the S+ tier or whatever. Some of my favorites are Infinity War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, all of the Iron Mans, but I rewatch 3 the most. Captain America Civil War, the original Avengers, and then probably the experience that I will remember the most and like tell my kids about and like pass on to them is seeing Endgame and Infinity War in theaters for the first time. And I'll talk again about big theater experiences, but this is like probably my second. Again, it's in the S plus tier for me of theater going experiences. Infinity War made me like sick to my stomach at the end because they freaking lose, and they lose bad, and I had never seen something like that. And think about it. I'm, on the younger side, I grew up with these characters. I was a kid when Iron Man first came out. And so I had been on this journey with them and was maturing with them and was so invested that it literally affected me physiologically. It was seeing them lose. It's crazy. And then seeing Endgame and seeing that moment of triumph and seeing, T'Challa walk in and be the symbol of wait, it's going to be okay. We're going to win. And kind of, I get, I'm not big into sports, but I felt that moment of oh my gosh, our team was on the back foot for so long and we are going to do it. We're going to get the big trophy, you guys. And the theater experience, I had the perfect theater experience because it wasn't completely silent, and it wasn't a Roman Colosseum the entire time where you couldn't hear the dialogue. It was the perfect mix where in the moments you wanted them, you want to cheer, we cheered, and it was just this really communal bonding moment where we all were just witnessing one of the greatest conclusions to a story in film, and it was so important, and is so important, and it is one of those theater experiences. And I saw it at 2 a.m. so we're all exhausted but just glued to the screen and just cheering and throwing popcorn around and just being oh my gosh, I can't believe this is amazing, and then just all crying together at the end of it. And it just man, that's the magic of movies, that's the magic of the summer blockbuster of just this amazing shared experience that we're all gonna remember now. And so that MCU, you already said it. It's crazy that it's on the same place for us. That's my number 3. We're getting to the top 2 now, Zach. It's the big leagues.
Top 2, it's the big leagues, which are actually both shows for me.
Whoa!
I know. And so my number 2, this may be surprising to a lot of people, is a show called White Collar. White Collar White Collar is it's a FBI drama where this FBI agent in the White Collar Division, I know, what a catchy name for an FBI agent in the White Collar Division, gets this convicted forger and just really creative and smart guy to kind of be a CI and to help him, and then they just end up kicking butt in the FBI world. And I love those types of stories. I love when there are just good stories of people kicking ass, right? That's why I love the MCU. But I think also in this FBI, kind of in this genre of sort of I don't know, dramas, if you will. Suits is also in there, which is a show about lawyers, and I think that also is kind of ascribes to that, where it's people I love kicking ass. I think going way back, Prison Break is probably in this category.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Where, I just think it's enjoyable television. I don't think by any means any of them deserved daytime Emmys. I think the acting is good. By no means am I watching it being this is bad, but I still like it. It's good TV, and it's captivating, it's thrilling. There are times where it's, more silly and charming, but for the most part, it's dramatic and thrilling and entertaining. And so I really love shows like that and find myself binging them and enthralled with them pretty often, to be completely honest. So White Collar, is one of my favorite shows of all time. I would recommend it to anybody, and it's at my number 2. I know, isn't that surprising?
Wow, I'm in shock. I can't believe it. But you know what? You're going to do you. You're chasing your bliss, and I love that for you. Okay, my number 2 is Star Wars, suckers. Um, I love
Nice.
me a Star Wars. Star Wars was like the first sort of world that I fell in love with in fiction, right? Um, and there's a lot of nostalgia associated to it. There's a lot of family connections associated to it. It's big in my family. Star Wars runs in my family.
Hmm.
And I remember, specifically my dad showing me the VHS, like he had, was showing me some precious treasure that he had like unearthed. And I was like, whoa, like there was a lot of weight to it, a lot of gravitas when he popped it in, and just immediately I was glued. The music, the visuals, the characters swept up in this world, such a well built, well lived in looking world that I wanted to be in. Such instant classic iconography. Lightsabers, the Millennium Falcon, the Force, Yoda, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, the TIE Fighter, the X-Wing. All of these things come from like these talented artists making otherworldly things that I was just fascinated with. I wanted to know everything about them. I wanted to have all the toys. And I just wanted to keep watching it over and over again. Um, it's like the series that I've been with the most. Star Wars has been with me for as long as I can remember, and it's so special to me. And I love the original trilogy. Return of the Jedi, it's not aged as well for me. I think some of the Ewok stuff, I could take or leave. I love the Ewoks, but I just don't know if they belong in the big finale. Um,
Yeah.
but 4 and 5, I think, are borderline perfect movies. I think they set out to do something and they exceed it. I think they tell, the first one is a little bit, on the basic side, I suppose, when you break it down to its bare essentials, but it's so unique. It's this big, sweeping, epic space opera on a scale we've never seen before, with technology we've never seen before, with special effects we've never seen before, that we honestly haven't seen since. To that level, in that like at that groundbreaking level where you're like, I've never seen anything like this, except for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Uh-oh! That's right. I'm a fan of those movies as well, baby.
Yeah.
I don't really like the prequels. That's what I'll say. Zach said, I agree with Zach on the prequels, where I love the ideas. I love that they expand on them in the Clone Wars and tell them in a really cool way and execute on it better. I don't think those movies are very well-made movies.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it's a stumbling block for me to enjoying them. I think they look bad. I think they sound bad. Well, no, the John Williams has never failed. I think they like the
Yeah, how
actors aren't
dare
doing a
you.
great job because they're given non-human things to say and expected to deliver them like a human would,
Right.
and that's not fair to them. It's a whole thing about writing. Anyways, um, I'd love the original trilogy, and I always wanted to know what happened afterwards. And when I heard that they were gonna make a sequel to Star Wars, I lost my mind, and I had the biggest expectations, and it exceeded all of them. The Force Awakens coming out is like a seminal moment in film to me. It brought back Star Wars. It revived Star Wars, and it captured the magic for me. It really transported me back to my childhood. I do think it's different enough from A New Hope. I do think it has new things to say in a familiar way that is good, because it introduces people who are new to, like, this is what Star Wars is, but it also is like, and yet we have something new to say. We have these new characters, and we're going to take you on a ride. And I loved it. I saw it in the theater probably 5 times. And I
Wow.
remember a bunch of friends of mine rented out the theater, and we all just went and watched the theater as a big group of friends, and it was just so fun. And I remember cheering when the lightsaber is flickering, or is like floating around in the snow, and then it goes past Kylo and goes to Rey. I was like, yeah! It was just so electrifying. And I immediately loved these characters. And that only solidified further in The Last Jedi, which, okay, The Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope are like flawless, perfect movies in my opinion. They're probably the best made, and I respect them the most. The Last Jedi is my favorite, and here's why. And you know what? You can not think that, and that's fine. I'm not. I don't want to be mean spirited about it. I don't think lesser of you if you don't like it, and I don't think I'm right. I just personally really like it, and I really appreciate that it does something so different for Star Wars. And it made Rey my favorite Star Wars character. Her and you know what, 9 kind of screwed things up. We don't talk about 9. But her journey in 8 of finding out, you know what, everybody thought she was somebody important. Everybody thought, Star Wars is about important people. No, it's not. I think it broke that Star Wars tradition of like, you have to be a part of the 2 important space families. Yeah. No, you don't. The Force seeks out balance. It chose Rey because she's a good person. And that's cool to me. But she has these weaknesses. She has these flaws. She's not a Mary Sue character. And she's a nobody that's going up against the biggest somebody ever, right? He comes from the most powerful family in the world, and she comes from a desert. And that conflict and their sort of like weird connection through the Force, which we'd never seen before, their sort of their dynamic was so unique for a villain and a hero. And what? Just killing the main old man bad guy in the middle of the second movie, and then making Kylo more of a threat. Such a weird, such a bold move that I literally when that happened in the theater, and then the lightsaber goes, it flicks back to Rey, and then Rey and Kylo stand back to back in this moment of understanding of like, oh frick, we just kind of changed the whole galaxy, and there are a lot of people that are mad at us. And there's that whole throne room fight scene. That's one of my favorite Star Wars scenes. What a like transcendent moment in the theater that was. I was levitating off my seat. I do remember my hands were like shaking for the entirety of that scene, just because it was so unexpected. It was so electric, and I could talk about The Last Jedi for 75 straight days. I love the way it looks. I think it is the best looking Star Wars film. I think Rian Johnson's directing is fantastic. I think the color grading is fantastic. I think the action scenes are some of the best choreographed in the series. And the showdown with Luke, force projecting across the universe to not fight Kylo, is the most Jedi thing in Star Wars, period, end of sentence. It is a non-violent way to solve a conflict through the Force, and he buys them time to escape, and he sacrifices himself doing it. It's so Jedi that it hurts, and it redeems him from being, the snarky old man to like, okay, you know what? I'm going to face down the entire First Order via a Force ghost, the most powerful Force thing we've ever seen. I love it. I love Star Wars. I love The Last Jedi. I love, I've mentioned the Clone Wars and the Mandalorian. Star Wars is very, very, very important to me. And Episode 8 is my favorite movie, but it is not my favorite Star Wars thing. And we will get to that right after Zach goes through his honorable mentions. Take it away, Zach.
Oh, yeah. So before we do our ones, we're going to mention some honorable mentions, which I honestly probably could have mentioned in some of these groups, but just wanted to let them have their time to shine. So quickly, Bob's Burgers, amazing cartoon, super funny, one of my favorites. The Mandalorian is probably the best Star Wars content out there. Super fun.
Whoa.
Love the Western vibes. Really love, a good show. Yeah, I said it. And then third, you mentioned this, but I didn't know we both shared a love for Sherlock. Probably could have been placed in my like white collar drama category. But it deserves its own shout. What an amazing, also like a really interesting experiment in TV where it's like 3 episodes, really long, and that's the season, right? I just think is actually really fascinating and was brilliantly executed and delivered. So those are my honorable mentions, and my number one is Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is maybe my favorite
Oh,
piece of visual content ever. Yeah, and the reason
wow.
it's just everything I love perfectly encapsulated into one thing. Especially season one. Season two of Ted Lasso is good, and it expands on characters. It's a little more somber and sad and intense at times, but still amazing storytelling. The character arcs I think are going a really fun direction and are really interesting. But season one of Ted Lasso I think is the perfect show in every way.
Mm.
The music in that is great. It's by Marcus Mumford. I actually listen to that album when I'm like doing work or reading something. If I just need like a lyricless noise in the background, that's the one I go to. It's just so amazing. But the acting is great. I think the story, especially being developed from like a really silly commercial. My only criticism is I know the commercial was like, oh, Ted Lasso doesn't know anything about soccer, blah, blah, blah. And they kind of put that into the show at times where like he'll ask a stupid question, like kind of to keep that vibe. I don't always love that. It doesn't always feel like it's the most fitting for the time. But everything else in that show, if I were to take one piece of content with me to a deserted island, that's what it would be. Because it is funny, it is sweet, it is charming, it is heartfelt, it is dramatic. It pulls every emotion from me. And if you've seen it, the scene with Ted in the bar playing darts is easily, I think, the best scene in maybe ever. It's just amazing. So
Whoa.
I cannot recommend Ted Lasso enough. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's just amazing. It's easy to watch. It's short enough to really binge as well. So Ted Lasso just has a very special place in my heart for being a very unexpected show that I ended up loving.
Hmm.
And so that is my number one. Ted Lasso is the best piece of visual media that I think I've ever engaged with. So
Wow. I really gotta get on that, huh?
you do. No, you do. It's amazing. But I almost think I think you would like it. I think we would have different opinions on it, which would be interesting. But yes, you should watch it.
Okay. Um, Before I get to my number one, here are my honorable mentions. Gotta start off the list with Jurassic Park, a true classic, a pioneer of visual effects, a great story, a great warning that the rest of the franchise kind of forgot about with the lesson of that movie. And just, yeah, something that really, you know, dazzled me as a kid, I guess you could say. And yeah, really scared me and really gripped me. Jurassic Park, a classic, and a deserved classic at that. Next on my honorable mentions is Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, classic pirate adventure, based off of a Disney ride, which I love. And it's just a really fun time. I love the characterization of Jack Sparrow in this one. I love the journey that all the characters go on. The music is so swashbuckling, just gets you in the mood for buckling some swash. And it's just a really fun time. Next up has got to be Lord of the Rings, an iconic trilogy. Really immense scale that kind of still amazes. The sheer scope and expanse of it, and the beautiful directing by Peter Jackson. Just really a triumph of filmmaking, Lord of the Rings is. And next we got Forrest Gump. I used to consider Forrest Gump my favorite movie, oddly enough. It's not anymore, but I do have a really special place for it. I love Tom Hanks' performance. I love the journey that this character goes on, and I love the clashing tones. And it's also really emotionally resonant in some parts. Wrapping up the list here, Tron Legacy. It's a weird Disney live-action film, but it really aesthetically appealed to me and kind of informed what I like for a while. and another banging soundtrack. Inside by Bo Burnham is probably the thing in the past few years that has impacted me the most. A really deeply moving, upsetting, fascinating piece of art that I think really encapsulates the era that we were in 2020 / still are in, and is something that I think will stick with me for a very, very long time. And then rounding out my honorable mentions, The Dark Knight. You already talked about it. It's a classic. It brought up it brought superhero movies into the modern era. It brought them to the point where they could be taken seriously, where they could, expand into different genres, and where they could sort of play with the big boys of cinema. And it just kind of really opened the door for this new era of superhero movies that we're in. And it's also just really good on its own. Like you said, the performances, the directing, the sophistication of the story, puts Dark Knight on my honorable mentions. All right, now to my number one. It's been a while since the intro to this podcast, but if you were a keen-eared listener, you mentioned you'd remember that I mentioned that this is covering everything else entertainment-wise that isn't video games, including but not limited to TV shows, movies, and theme parks. And so, my number one favorite thing in the world that is not a video game, this is even higher than video games, is Disneyland. The Disney theme parks in general, Disneyland in specific.
Yeah.
You'll be hearing more about this. Don't you worry, okay? But this is my favorite place to exist at. It's really special to me, and you know what? I grew up right next to it, so that's an advantage I had. I recognized that, and my family was pass holders for years. And it was just like our backyard. But I really grew to appreciate it in high school. I have an article about this on batterylow.co if you want to read all the juicy deets. But in high school, I had to write a paper about an influential American entrepreneur, and for whatever reason, I picked Walt Disney, and I focused on his development of Disneyland, but also his innovations in cartooning, in movies, in weirdly enough, space engineering. Look it up; it's crazy. But him being at the park at Griffith Park in LA and seeing his daughters on a merry-go-round and him sitting on the bench and being like, you know what, I want to build a place where we can have fun together, is, it's just so sweet, and it just has spawned such an incredible place, an incredible series of places. And his story, his struggle of getting it built, and him putting his creativity and the storytelling above everything else, sacrificing financial integrity, selling his cars to fund it, driving on the freeway trying to find enough trees to take to Disneyland to populate it. All these crazy stories of putting everything into this place so that families can have fun together, can adventure together, can be kids together, in a safe and clean place that is built by storytellers to put you in a place that you've never been before. And there were no theme park engineers, because theme parks didn't exist. He made the first one. And so it was built by animators. It was built by storyboard artists. It was built by engineers who later became Imagineers. And so there's storytelling everywhere you go. There's little details everywhere you go. There is a level of dedication to immersing you in a place that is not where you just came from, that is really inspiring and really, I don't know, it really gripped me. So when I wrote that paper, I started digging into everything I could. It was my favorite piece of, my favorite essay I ever wrote in school. And I even reused some of it in college. Anyways, I loved digging into it, and I still do. And I would watch like every documentary I could. I would read like all of these like websites that I could. I would read these books. I would look at all the old material, the old promotional material for Disneyland. And then I would go back to Disneyland as a pass holder after I graduated high school with this newfound appreciation. And I just loved existing there. It's such a unique atmosphere. It's architecturally really interesting. It's just so aesthetically stimulating in every sense. There's great food there. It's just a great facilitator of making memories with your friends or family, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I haven't mentioned rides at all. And that's something that you need to learn about me is I, you know, would sometimes go to Disneyland and not go on any rides. Because I just love being there. I love seeing the shows. I love eating there with my friends. I love watching a fireworks show with my dad. I love shopping on Main Street with my friends. I love, you know, watching the marching band go by as I'm, you know, sipping on some lemonade on a summer day, hearing the old ragtime music. It's just a place. It became a place where I could escape, right? You could get away from the stress of the real life. You could get away from homework. You can get away from politics. You can get away from anything. And you could just go and let out your inner child there and just be in a place that is so interesting and so unique, and is so dedicated to putting you in a specific time and place through art. And I think that's so interesting. And more recently, I've been able to go to Disney World, and that's been amazing. I am a Disneylander for life, though, but I will say Epcot and Animal Kingdom are incredible. And I just love, again, digging into the lore, the history, and of course, going on the rides. It's really fun to make memories going on rides and having a thrilling experience with people and sharing that. But yeah, I'm one of those people where you can say, you know, Epcot or the monorail or Disneyland or Walt Disney, and if you say it in a reverent enough tone, I will start to tear up, just because I have that much love for it in my heart. And you know, I know every word to Walt Disney's opening speech. I love like that vintage feel. I love like old Tomorrowland being like this retro look at the future. There's just something so charming, so of its time, and so sweet about it. And more recently, I mentioned the Star Wars thing, that Episode 8 was not my favorite Star Wars thing. It's a place where Imagineers can experiment with new technology. Disneyland has been on the forefront of technology for years, and no better is that exemplified than in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. The best theme park land on the planet. Okay?
Yeah.
It puts you in Star Wars in a way that nothing has ever been able to do. They have a full-size Millennium Falcon. Everywhere you look, you cannot see outside. You cannot see the rest of Disneyland. There is paint chipping and rust and dripping goo and oil stains and blaster marks everywhere you look. It's a lived-in world that feels like you are not only on a set of a Star Wars movie, you are just on a Star Wars planet. And all the cast members are in character, and all the costumes look incredible, and you get to pilot the Millennium Falcon in one of the rides, and the other rides is Rise of the Resistance, and you like sneak onto a ship in like a 4 or 5 phased experience that's like 20 minutes long, and there's multiple different ride sequences and the most incredible effects I've ever seen on an attraction. And for someone who loves Star Wars and that sort of live action Disney park storytelling and putting you in an experience, it's gold. It's the gold standard for theme park experiences. Rise of Resistance probably is the best ride on the planet, and there's no asterisks there, baby. So I could go on forever, and I will go on in future episodes. Don't you worry. The podcast will mostly be gaming focused, but I will break in here every now and then and talk about Disney parks because I can't help myself. And so, yeah, very, 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 very special place in my heart for the Disney theme parks, and the memories that I've made there over the years. And that's my number one.
Yeah.
And that'll round out the list, folks. Anything else to add, Zach, before I land this plane?
No, I don't think so. That was our lists, and we're sticking to it. I did want to mention really quick where you can find us. Other than the podcast, if you're listening to this, you either found our Spotify or YouTube. But we are a blog, batterylow.co. You can also find us on socials at batterylowblog, on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at Zachary. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matt Covarrubias. So if you want to engage with us or see thoughts and really anything else beyond this, be sure to check us out there.
Yep. All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening to this Goliath of an episode. Be sure to check out our theme song, Echoes by HurricaneTurtle. Thanks to them for letting us use that track. We will see you next time, folks, with not a top 10 episode. We're going to be getting into the meat of it, all right? So be sure to stick around for that. Again, thanks so much for listening. We appreciate you hanging out with us. And folks, always remember to check your batteries.